Hello there everyone, I'm Christina at CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make these wirework wedding earrings. And I've made two different pairs here. First of all, I've made a pair in copper that look like this. And then I've also made a pair in silver. So it's the exact same basic technique here and design. So they look like this here. I just wanted to make two different colours just to show you how they can look quite different depending on the materials that you choose to use. And now they also hang and dangle nicely from the ear because they have a bit of movement to them. And that movement also really emphasizes all the bling that we got going on, because on all of them here what we have is in the middle there's a rose montee, and then along the outside edges we have bicones, and also on that dangle on the bottom. And they're also Swarovski AB coating, so it really adds that sparkle. And obviously with the movement when they hang in the ear, it just really emphasizes that. So these are the earrings of the wedding set that I've made. So what I'm going to do is make a playlist where I add all the tutorials for all the pieces in that set. So you can check that out in the description box below, and I'm going to add those tutorials as soon as they become available to that playlist. But if you want to learn how to make these earrings here, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we need. First of all, I have two different gauges of regular round silver coated copper wire. And first of all, I have a 1mm one. So this is the thicker gauge. It's going to be the base wire and the structure of the piece. Then I have a 0.25mm. So this is a fine weaving wire that we're also going to use to add in our beads. And then as for the beads that we need, first of all here I have some rose montees. These are 4mm Swarovski crystal AB, and we just need one per earring. And then I have some 2.5mm bicones, also Swarovski crystal AB, and we need 7 of these per earring. And then I have 2 head pins here, one for each earring, and just make sure that the head pin that you're using can go through the holes in your bicones. And then I have a couple of jump rings here which we're going to use to attach the piece that we make to the earring findings. Now the earring findings that I'm using are these earring posts and butterfly backs. Obviously you can choose whichever ones that you prefer. And also do check out the description box below the video here, because I'm going to put the whole material list along with any links that you might need down there. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then to make one earring, we're going to first of all need a length of our 1mm wire of about 15cm, and this is going to be the base wire that's going to create the shape. And then we need a length of a 0.25mm wire here, also about 15cm. This is going to be used to attach the rose montee. And then we need another length of the 0.25mm here, but this is about 70cm long. This is going to be used to attach all the bicones with. So to create this shape, I'm going to be using my 6-step bell making pliers here, because I know exactly what size loop I'm going to get, and I'm going to be using 2 different sizes on this. Now you can use round nose pliers to create this, but just be aware it's a little bit more difficult because they are tapered. So then to start, I'm going to then grab my pliers here, and then also one length of my base wires, and I'm going to start using the second smallest step on my pliers here, and I just want to place them towards one end of my wire, so just leave a short little tail there, doesn't have to be too much. Then what I need to do is grab the long end here and bring it around my pliers on the sides there that I want, all the way, so we basically create more or less a full circle, something like that, so we overlap with that short little tail that we left. And this is going to be our first loop. We have the long end here coming back upwards, kind of going in the opposite direction as that little tail. Then we need to move to the next loop, and this is going to be the middle one on this side, and this is where I want to step up one step on the pliers, so one step larger. So this is technically the third smallest step on the pliers, and I want to place them a little bit up on the tail of the wire that we're working with, but with still some space between the first loop and then where I place the pliers to create the next loop, somewhere around there. Then I bring the long end around my pliers again, and you can rotate the piece however you need to, and again overlap, so bring it over the previous wire, kind of over the previous loop there. You can see we then end up with a bit of space between the two loops, which is what we want as well, and then have the long end here coming back out in this direction, where we're going to then start making the next loop. Now what you can do as well is you can adjust the spacing between your loops there by rolling it closer or opening it up. But then on this step down here, I need to move back down to the first size that we used on the pliers, which is the same as the first loop there, so the second smallest. So again, place it a bit down, not right next to that previous loop, but a bit of space between. And then bring the end around your pliers. And now in this case here, I want to bring this tail underneath the previous loops. Kind of get it as flat as possible. Something like that. And then basically what we just want to do now is just make sure we adjust anything that we need to get this as symmetrical as possible. So again, if the gap on this side here that we just made is too large compared to the other side, you can always roll it closer to get it more symmetrical. Or if it's too close, then you can kind of just open it up. So just like this. But then once you're happy with how this side looks, I then just want to get rid of that first little tail that we left in the beginning there, just because it's a little bit in the way right now. And the way that I do that is by grabbing my flush cutters here, and then I just want to kind of flip this to the back where that little tail is, and we need to cut off the excess, but we still then are left with the first loop, so a complete loop there. So I'm basically going to cut it just before the point where the wire overlaps itself. Just place your cutters on that point, cut off the excess. So basically, when I then bring in my flat nose or chain nose pliers, you flatten it down, so we now make sure that the very end of that wire is butting up against the side of itself, but still completing that loop, the very first one, because that way we've also got rid of the end of the wire there and it's not going to catch or scratch on anything. So now this is the first half of our shape. So then to make the other half, to make it a complete shape, again I'm bringing in my 6-step bell making pliers here, and I'm starting with the second smallest step on there, just the same one that we used for the first loop and the third one on that first side. But now we need to make the other side of the shape as well to get it nice and symmetrical. So I placed my pliers a little bit up the wire from where it's crossing under the last one, because we basically need to make this other half symmetrical by first of all making the first loop here. So I'm bringing my tail around my pliers, going towards the other half there, and I'm bringing it over the top, make it a complete loop, and now we just want to have a look at it and see what it's like aligned with the others. So I can see I need to open this up a little bit because I want this loop that I'm making now to basically align with the first one. So I want them to sit as symmetrically as they possibly can next to each other. Just need to open it up a little bit more and bring it closer together. So we don't want too big of a gap between them either, but we still need to make sure we have space for the rose montee in the middle. Something a little bit like this. I think just tighten it up a little bit more. So as you can see, you can easily adjust your loops as you're making them by rolling them in or opening them up until you feel like you're happy with how it sits. So maybe something a little bit like that. And then just make sure that this is pulled around and it's going over the top. So now this is being used in the middle there for the next loop, which is the next size up. It's going to be the same as the middle one on the bottom. So place your pliers a little bit up the wire from that previous loop, and then bend the long tail around your pliers. And now I want to bring this underneath the previous loops to again get it as flat as possible, and we'll get a nice symmetrical look to it. And now just take a bit of time to make sure that this sits across, straight across from the middle of the previous one. Now I can see I need to kind of just close it up a little bit more, tighten it up. And if you need to maneuver around, do that now. It's easy to do it while you're making the loop, rather than once you've made the whole piece. You can't really adjust it so much anymore, just only so slightly. There's something a bit like that. Until you're completely happy, and then we have this tail going out to the side, and the place where I need to place my very last loop, which is going to then be the same as the third one on the first side there. And again, we need to step one size down. Actually, I just think I need to tighten up just a little bit more. Bring it in closer. Don't want the shape to be too open. But then bring the pliers onto the wire a little bit further down, and then bring the tail that we're working with back around, and you can just bring this over the top. It doesn't really matter because we're now also going to finish this off afterwards. And then you can just tighten it up a little bit. Just make sure that this last little loop now fits in this space nicely, and it's all kind of working together nicely and symmetrically as well. So I need to tighten it up a little bit more. And you can see, also keep an eye on the distance between the loops if they're even with each other. Bring it in a little bit more there. And then otherwise, just make sure that it's as symmetrical as possible. And then we just need to get rid of the excess tail of this end as well. So I'm going to get rid of that here in the same way that we cut off that first little tail. So just take my flush cutters and then place them right before the point where they overlap, or the wire overlaps with itself. Around there. And then cut off the excess. Get rid of that. And then just make sure you flatten this down. So again, the end of the wire butts up against the side of itself, right at the point of that loop there. So now we have a basic shape in place, and it looks like this. So then what we need to do with our shape here is attach the rose montee in the middle, because we created that little space right there for it to slot in basically and fit just nicely. But obviously we need to fasten it so it's not going to move around like this, because it's not fastened at all right now. And to do that, we're going to need to get the short length of the 0.25mm that we cut ready. And I'm just going to start towards one end here. First of all, I want to attach this to my shape, so it's fastened before we actually attach the rose montee. So towards one end of the weaving wire there, what I want to do is I'm working on the front and I'm slotting it in between these two loops in the shape. So basically the first one, which is a smaller one, and then that middle one, the second one, which is a larger one. Then I want to take the end here and then bring it up in the middle of the shape, in a little gap that we've created in the middle there, right below that large loop. So it comes out right there in the middle. So when we pull that tight, it's going to actually wrap around that little length of wire that's between those two loops. And I want to do that again. Come up in the same place. So we can pull that tight and make sure when we pull this that the two wraps that we're just doing now are laying flat next to each other, so not crossing over and under each other. So something like that. Now we have this weaving wire attached. And what I then want to do is grab my rose montee and add it to the end of this wire. Now this rose montee here has got a little cross section on the back where the little channels go through, and those are the holes that we need to go through. To begin with here, it doesn't matter which ones you go through, just put your wire through either one of them, straight through to the other side. And then what we need to make sure to do is we're on the front here where the rose montee slots in, but as we lay it across the middle there, make sure that the crystal side of it, so the front of it, is facing upwards away from the piece, because obviously that's what we want to be able to see. And then as the wire is going through that rose montee, it crosses over perfectly to fasten it on the other side, basically in the exact same place, but obviously on the opposite side there. So then just take the long end, make sure the wire is going in between those two loops, and then we need to come up through in the exact same place in that little gap in the middle, so between the rose montee and just below that large loop in the middle, to just wrap around that wire in between those two loops again. And do that a couple of times. Again, making sure that these wraps stay flat next to each other. And then bringing it around again. Not just like that. Now what we then want to do is also go through the other channel in the rose montee. So in this case here, I'm just wrapping on the left side of that large loop. So what I want to do is come in towards the back. I want to bring it behind that large loop and go towards the right. And just bring it in between those other two loops on the other side there. And then now we need to come down through that same little gap underneath that large loop, but on this side here, and then pull that nice and tight, and then do that again. Again, making sure that we're not overlapping the wire here. We have the wraps that we're doing laying flat next to each other. Again, that's twice now. Then we need to go through the other channel in the rose montee, so I'm just going to, instead of wrapping it again, come around the side there, but actually go through the rose montee then. And then as I'm pulling this through, make sure that the wire is slotting into that same little space here, and basically wrapping around next to the other ones we've just done. What you can do is always go in and push your wraps close together, so they become nice and neat. Now on the other side where the wire is coming out, we basically just need to do the same thing, because this is the final side to kind of attach it to. So it's going over the top of that wire there, again slotting in between those two loops, and then coming up in that little gap between the rose montee and underneath that large loop in the middle, and making sure to go through that and basically wrap around that base wire between the two loops a few times again, just until you feel like it's nice and secure, and then you can feel that the rose montee is now fastened and it's not going to go anywhere. So then I'm just flipping my piece around to the back here because I just want to get rid of the excess of these weaving wires so we can get them out of the way, move on to the next bit that we're going to do. So I'm going to get my flush cutters here, and both of them are coming towards the back of the piece, and they've kind of done a few wraps. Make sure you have a few wraps before you go and cut them off, because otherwise they might be more likely to come undone. But then, as it's doing the final wrap, towards the back I'm going to cut off the excess. We're making sure I leave a short little tail, so cut that off. Then I take my chain nose pliers, and right where that little tail is, as if it's continuing to wrap, we just want to kind of press it in to basically continue the final wrap there, so the actual end of it gets nestled into the middle of the piece rather than sticking out somewhere that's going to maybe catch on something. The same with the other one, doing the final wrap that we did. Cut off the excess but leave a short little tail, and then just make sure to nestle that in by kind of continue the wrap. What I like to do is just get it in the right place there, is flatten it down and then take my pliers and kind of rotate it around to make sure I guide it into place. So just like that, and put your finger over it and make sure you can't feel the end of the wires, because if you can, you just need to kind of tuck it away a bit more until you for definite can't feel the wire sticking out anywhere. So now that I have the rose montee attached there in the middle, we need to move on to do the embellishments on the edges. And to do that, we need to use our other length of the 0.25. And first of all, I want to find the middle of this. So I'm just going to kind of put the two ends of it together like that, so I can find roughly where the midpoint is. And just hold on to that, because then first of all, I want to attach this to my piece. So where we need to attach it is on one of the large loops there, doesn't matter which end, but right in the middle of a large loop on the bottom part there, but then also the middle of the actual weaving wire. So I just hold on to it there, hold it in place, and then I take the end, one end I'm going to start with, and then bring that through. So basically just start wrapping it by attaching it, or wrapping it around a couple of times. Like this, and now the wire is attached. Now what we need to do is continue weaving for a bit, because I need to get this in position so we can also start adding in the bicones between the loops. So what we need to do is, we've attached this now, so I'm just going to continue with this because I'm already working with this end here. And from this midpoint in the large loop, I want to work my way, continuing in the same manner. So coil this weaving wire around the base wire until I get close to the point where these two loops meet up. So the large one with the next small one. So I'm basically just going to work my way all the way towards that point. So make sure you just wrap from the middle here and then towards that side. And once you've reached that, go back to the middle and then use the other end. And in this case, you just wrap in the opposite direction. But you just continue the wraps otherwise. And here you obviously want to keep wrapping to the same place till you reach this point here where the two loops meet up. So now wrap both ends of the wire here to about the same place on either side, and this is the point where I need to add in the first bicone. So again, I'm just going to do one side at a time, and then get a bicone on the end of the wire, and then I want to let it drop all the way down, just like this here. So this is going to slot in perfectly just between those two loops there. And then otherwise we just need to continue the wrapping, but now just moving from this first large loop to the next one. So making sure that bicone stays in that little gap between them. I'm now just going to continue wrapping in the next one, which is then going to fasten the bicone there into that little slot perfectly. And obviously we now just continue wrapping here to first of all fasten it more, but also to then make our way to the next point where we need to add in the next bicone on this side. So make sure your wraps here become nice and tight, flat next to each other so they don't overlap, to make it as neat as possible. So continue on this side here, working your way up to the middle, where again the next bicone is going to slot in, and obviously the same thing on the other side. you grab a bicone as well, add that onto the wire, and let it drop all the way down so that slots in perfectly there. So just on the opposite side. And remember here we're wrapping in the opposite direction, so this comes from below. Really depends how you started it out, but that's just how mine has worked out. So keep wrapping on here till this is now fastened, and then the same thing as the other side. You just continue wrapping until a little bit before the point where these next two loops in the middle meet. Add your next bicone on both sides, and then you wrap again on the next loop up to add another bicone between these top loops as well. And then once you do that, we just need to work our way towards the very top in that large loop. So now I keep wrapping here and adding in the bicones between the loops until my two lengths of the weaving wire there meet right there in the middle at the very top. So what we need to do now is just finish them off. So all I'm going to do is grab a pair of wire cutters here, flush cutters. Make sure that they're literally as close to each other as you can be, so you don't have any more space of the base wire showing through. So you really wouldn't be able to do another wrap if you wanted to. Cut off the excess one side first, and then that short little tail that we're going to have left, just use your chain nose pliers to push that in. So it's going to sit in between all the other wraps and not stick out anywhere. Make sure you put your finger over it so you can feel it, whether it's completely gone or whether you need to tuck it in a bit more. On the other side, do the same thing. Cut off the excess. So we can then just flatten down the end and tuck it away. Just get hidden away like that. So that's how we finish them off. So all this has to do now really is add that little extra drop on the bottom. So this is where we get our head pin in, and then we want to attach a final bicone for this earring here. Put that on the head pin, push it all the way down, and then all we want to do with this really is make a wrapped loop. So I'm going to first of all take my chain nose pliers, place them on the head pin here a little bit above the bead, making sure the bead is pushed all the way down to that little ball, and then I want to put a bend into it. So something like that, just bend it outwards to the side. And then we need to make a loop. So again, I'm going to get my 6-step bill making pliers here. You can also use round nose pliers. Place them with the size that you want. I'm using the second smallest, right above that bend that we did, and then bring the tail of the head pin back around over the top of it to create a full complete circle. Something like that. Just make sure it's nice and even all the way. And then you just want to make sure we kind of open it up here. You can do that by just using the chain nose pliers, because we first of all, before we close this up, we need to attach it. So we attach it through one of the large loops there. Doesn't really matter which end because they're both symmetrical anyway, both sides. So attach it through, then I take my chain nose again, grab onto the head pin, but around the loop, just the best you can. So something like that, because then we'll make sure that that circle that we made stays in place. Then we need to wrap the rest of this length here, the tail, around itself, but underneath the circle. Basically just filling in this space that we have until we run into the bead and we can't wrap anymore. That also then fastens the bead in place, so it's not going to kind of sit and move around too much. So usually about 3 wraps or so, depending how much space you left. Something like that. And then to cut off the excess so we don't have this end of the head pin sticking out, just go in with the flush cutters, cut off the excess like that. And you always want to make sure that little end that we cut off, you're going to have a little bit of wire sticking out. So to make sure that gets pushed in, take your chain nose and push on that very end of the wire, so that doesn't stick out and catch or anything. So just like this. And we'll basically have the main part done. So all there's left to do now is attach our earring finding in the exact same way, but on the other end there opposite, and obviously using a jump ring. So just do that, make the other part of it as well so you have the full set, and then you're going to have your finished earrings. So now that I made the other earring as well, I have my full pair, and this is what they look like. So you can see they hang nicely, and then I've also made another set in copper just to show how they can look different depending on what colour wire and what colour materials that you choose to use. So obviously we have lovely sparkle in the piece because we have the rose montee right there in the middle on both of them, and then I've added those bicones along the outside edges and also that little dangle on the bottom. Just gives that extra bit of movement, so they hang really nicely on the ear. So these are the earrings in my bridal set, so the wedding jewelry set that I've made here. So you can check out the tutorials for the other pieces that I'm making as well in the playlist that I'm going to make, and they're all going to be added to that as the tutorials become available. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial here for these earrings, and otherwise thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.